It's just before dawn on a cold December morning, and the surrounding landscape is shrouded in mist. Yet within that I can see a mound, a great swelling in the ground. And as the light comes, it will reveal an incredible prehistoric structure. For this week's Open Country, I've come to Newgrange in County Meath in Ireland. And while so many associate Stonehenge with the longest day, this monument was constructed more than 5,000 years ago to commemorate the shortest. And I'm standing here with Professor Gabriel Cooney of University College Dublin. Don't you at this time get a certain feeling as we can see the mound, grass-topped, the quartz rocks that form the walls, the curbstones that trim along the bottom of Newgrange? Do you have any thoughts when you see it? Or have you seen it so many times?
No, you never can see it too many times. The light this morning with this fog coming down is very evocative,
isn't it?
Of something, as you say, coming out of the dark. And we are just before the sunrise, when, of course, this monument, we know, is aligned on the sunrise at solstice. It was deliberately built with a roof box at the entrance on a slope. The builders deliberately aligned the monument onto the sunrise, and so that the light would hit the floor at the back of the tomb.
Yeah. And just to stress, this was constructed over 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So that makes it older than Stonehenge, but the pyramids as well. It's huge. It covers like an acre of ground.
Covers an acre of ground. And I think the other thing to remember, of course, is that it's only one of three of these large monuments in this area, with Knowth and Dowth. And the monuments come at the end of a sequence of activity here that we probably takes us back to the times of hunter-gatherers. Ireland is inhabited from at least 8,000 BC. We have 4,000 years of hunter-gatherers. And if we think about the resources of the Bóinne, this must have been probably a special place. We know from the sods, for example, included in the mounds of Newgrange and Knowth, that the sods came from a bit like the fields we see around us today. They were already set out, cultivated fields. And very strong suggestions that people were both growing crops, wheat and barley, and the most important domesticated animal were cattle. So there are kind of elements of lifestyle that we associate with rural Ireland today, and we see the background to it here at Newgrange.
And it is quite a complex piece of construction.
It is complex. It combines architecture, art, and I think it's all focused around the notion of life and death. We know that systematically every site that's excavated has the remains of people inside. So ultimately, whatever else, all the other ideas that are built around these monuments, the alignment, all of this is about the people who are left inside. Since the discovery of this event in the 1960s, people now come back, and in a sense we're reenacting that kind of link between the living and the dead that was established by the people who first built the monument. People build monuments because it makes sense in a religious context, and it makes sense of their lives. You know, if you think about the mobilisation that was required for this, of course it's this labour involved, this kind of social organisation involved. You have to see it as a kind of a part of the ethos of what society was, that it was about coming together to build a monument like this. But also you refer to the stones, Helen.
Yes, curbstones.
So the
along
curbstones along the base are what are a stone known, or sandstone known as grey wacky, and we think that comes from the coast to the northeast, about 20-25 kilometres away, and probably was rafted along the quartz, probably from the Wicklow Dublin mountains.
And you talk about the quartz. Look about how that white quartz is glowing stronger in this morning light, just gradually revealing itself. It's like the icing round the sides of a giant Victoria sponge. That sort of feel, hasn't it?
Yeah. And of course there's an ongoing debate about whether the wall would have been as vertical as this. But either way, the first part of the valley that's hit by the sun is here because we're on the top of the hill. And it's only very gradually that the shadows fall away as you go down in the valley. You can see how powerful it must have been as a metaphor for that notion of we've passed the darkest time of the year, the light's be coming back onto the land.
There is, on a winter's morning, very early, a little bit of a ritual that goes on, and it involves Clare Tuffy, who manages the site.
Yes.
And I'm going to give you a hand with it.
Oh, very good. Come on then. Our entrance stone is very precious because of the wonderful art that's on it. So in the winter time, when we have a risk of freeze and thaw, we cover it every night. We wrap it up in a blanket.
So the tarpaulin, we fold it up and off. Oh, and there is revealed this art. Oh, yes.
Of Stone Age art.
It's the spiralling of lines and the curves and the swoops.
It's so beautifully carved that when the sun comes out a little later, you can still see the pick marks that the artist created.
I think this is one of the ways we get closest to people in the Neolithic, by actually looking at the detail of this art. This is the central point of the monument, and you're being brought into the centre of the monument through the passage.
It's quite spine-tingling.
It's time to go in, I think.
Isn't it? Just that need is there.
Yeah.
Yes. Come down to the entrance. There's a heavy flagstone which I'll have to duck under.
I often think in coming inside 5,000 years ago with the flickering light and imagining that the spirits of your ancestors were actually in here would be a very different experience. I'd say the loudest noise would be the pounding of your heart.
What I'm walking past are great flagstones, great boulders which have been set one upon another, and then sort of smaller pieces of stone between that. So you get this sense of layers being built up above and around you. And the pieces of artwork on these flagstones as you go along, the curves and spirals that we so associate with Celtic design now. But here they are from a civilization of 5,000 years ago. And then it opens out into this magnificent space. Oh, sorry.
I really like your reaction, but what I really like is that the outside of the monument has been restored. But once you bow your head and you come inside, you're walking into it as it always has been.
It's like walking into a cathedral. You can't help but look up into the space.
Yes.
And the way the flagstones, it's corbelled, this layering up of stones to a capstone at the top.
There is an estimated 200,000 tonnes of stone around this room. And when you think there is no cement, no mortar, I mean, you will never, ever get a builder nowadays giving you that kind of guarantee with work. And it is still totally watertight.
And when we come into this chamber here, in front of me and off to the sides, there are these alcoves. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, we have like a crucifix, a shape.
Yeah. In Irish passage tomb tradition, this cruciform shape is quite common. So everything about the room is bringing your attention to this recess.
And within this particular one, there is...
we call them basin stones because they look like basins and they're made of stone. And then in the recess behind us, we have a broken basin stone. And this was broken in the late 18th century. We have records of it by somebody who had a dream that there was gold buried beneath it. It's a great pity because it's in this recess that the sun shone.
And we look down the passageway, and what happens?
When you look down along the passage, you cannot see back out. There's a bend in the passage, and to see back out from here, you have to be prepared to get right down on your hands and knees. What happened was, it's even more clever than we told you. The whole monument, this gigantic structure, is built on the side of a hill. When you were walking up towards the entrance, you were climbing the hill. But when you stood outside on covering the entrance stone, you weren't on top of the hill. You are now on top of the hill. The floor level here is almost 2 metres higher than at the entrance. But you're so distracted coming along with your head and the width and looking at art that you never notice it. So they trick you completely. So when we're waiting for the sun here, it's the floor we're staring at. This is the most stared at piece of ground in Ireland, because it's like as if we're waiting for it to light up. And we have a lottery to attend.
Yeah. Because obviously you can only get a few people within the womb of this tomb, as it were.
Yes, we have 10 lottery winners each morning, and each person who wins a place gets to bring a guest. Because I always say it would be a great pity to experience this and not have someone to hold hands with in the dark. When I tell you this morning that the sun rises on the 21st of December at 2 minutes to 9, you kind of process that. But if you were here waiting for sun and it starts to get bright at about 8:15, you begin to suspect that I don't know what I'm talking about and you might have got it wrong. So there's a bit of anxiety there. So we always have to reassure people and bring them in far too early. So we're waiting here in the darkness. People start just talking about what brought them here. Or it's a time for philosophising and thinking of solstices past and solstices future, and the whole past and future gets all kind of blended in while we're waiting for the sun. And sometimes all the people who are on the outside, when the sun actually clears the horizon, they cheer. And it's like a sign from beyond, that it's happening, but we still have to wait, because the Earth's angle relative to the sun is different now than it was 5,000 years ago. So we lose out on 4 minutes of the light show. Everybody thinks that it's going to come blasting in at them, and it doesn't. The first beam of light hits the highest part of the hill. Yeah. So when the light comes in, that first glimmer is what Professor O'Kelly, who was the first person to see the light, described as a pencil. It comes through the roof box and it hits the floor just about in front of the edge of the broken stone, and it's so bright. And then as you watch it, it gets longer and wider. And there's a pool of light here in the middle of the floor. And then the light fills the passage. It is so bright, I am not exaggerating. It looks like people are gathered around a fire. Most thing people say is, we're so blessed to see the light. But then you think, what would it have meant to the people 5,000 years ago? Was it a sign? Well, it's a sign the longest nights are over. But it's also a sign that nothing in nature ends with darkness and death. There is always rebirth. And in the darkest of places, there is light.
Aye, Claire. I actually find it incredibly moving.
Yeah.
That sense of being here, that description, it's really strange.
And when you think about it, it's all about connecting with the past and connecting with our past, because there are very few experiences that you can reach out and touch and share with somebody who lived 5,000 years ago. And this is one place you can do it.
It's probably about dawn by now. It's just gone 9 o'clock. So I'm going to go back down the passageway to get a sense of the light coming through the roof box, which is just above the entrance. You can see in places where the stones are smooth. That's people just brushing their hands along these ancient tombstones. And outside waiting for me is Anthony Murphy. He's written extensively about this tomb and the others across the landscape. Oh, I'm back out into the light. It's such a sensation.
It is, isn't
it?
Yeah.
I know. I mean, you're so familiar with this place, with the tomb, with the winter solstice. It has sort of become ingrained in your very being, Anthony.
It has that effect on you. It comes to the stage where you feel it's a part of you and that you're a part of it. It draws you in. You see the scale of it, and you think about the achievements of people who are using primitive technology. But then you start to wonder about the complexity of it, the complexity of the art, and maybe the astronomy involved and the complexity of the spiritual beliefs of the people that built it. And it really captivates you, you know.
Yes, which is why it's appropriate that we are actually at the entranceway, because just above my head height there's this great flagstone lying flat. But then above that, if I tiptoe up, I can see this is what they call the roof box.
That's the roof box, yeah. But this is the aperture that makes the magic happen on Winter Solstice. So if you can think of it, it splits the entrance. There are two separate entrances. There's the entrance for the ordinary mortals, and then there's the entrance perhaps for the gods, you know. This window of light that allows the sunlight in on the solstice. You were talking there about the stone. I mean, that's one of the things that immediately captures the imagination about what it must have been like 5,000 years ago to be hauling a 3 or 4 ton stone, strap it onto the bottom of a barge, wait for the tide to come in, come down the sea and up the river. So we're talking about, for Newgrange, anything between 200 and 400 such journeys. And Newgrange is just one of 3 large passage tombs in the valley. Makes you wonder whether they did it as part of a common purpose which was connected with their spiritual beliefs and perhaps a belief in the afterlife, or whether there might have been some aspect of a ruling caste and sort of enslaved them into this project. We may never know the answer to that. What we do know is that we are continually impressed by the scale of it and what they were able to do. And remember that the technology that these people had was made out of stone and wood and bone. And, you know, when the sun will poke through now shortly, it's going to be glorious, you know. We're going to get this real ethereal feel about the monument. And that's, it, I believe, how it should be viewed in its natural state. Because principally in mythology, Newgrange is an abode of the gods. The Tuatha De Danann, the original gods, they were said to have been responsible for constructing the monuments. Okay, it's myth, but it has power for people, that's the point. And in the folk tradition, dew on the grass was considered to be fairy dew, something that the Bóinne Shi, the people who inhabited the mounds, were said to have sprinkled magically on the grass overnight. And that leads me to the whole idea of a she, which is an old Irish word, originally sheed, S-I-F-O-D. It's translated as a fairy mound or a fairy palace. So Newgrange was only known as Newgrange from the time of the Cistercians, I think in the 1200s. And before that, it was known as Sheed in Broga or Sheed Macindo. And it was very interesting this morning to hear you describe Newgrange as a sort of a swelling, because many people have commented on the organic nature of the sites, as if Newgrange is supposed to be pictured as a sort of a pregnant belly, as the mother goddess looming out of the landscape, sometimes as she is a hill. And I wonder to what extent the builders of Newgrange were trying to make their own she, to make their own hill, and it has that sort of natural feel about it.
Do you find there are growing numbers of people want to know more and more about Newgrange and visit it?
Yeah, over the past few decades we've had a movement away from the traditional church. In tandem with that, over the past 10 years we had an economic collapse, and the political institutions were sort of shaken to their core. So the traditional parties of government were decimated in the elections because people were angry, they were annoyed about what had happened. But people are migrating towards ancient and sacred sites. And I think they're trying to recapture something that goes much further back than the modern church, and gives them a sense that, yes, we've been around here for a long time, and it gives them a sort of a grounding.
If you come out of the Visitor Centre at Newgrange, there is a footbridge which takes us across the Bóinne, heading towards the monument itself, and Mary Gibbons and I have come out. And Mary, you are a tour guide, you've done it for many, many years. You cross this river, you take people to the monument, you know everything about it that there is to know, but something changed for you.
Obviously, when I went in there, I knew exactly what happens. It's a matter of fact that the sun will shine in there on the 21st of December.
You've heard it described time
yes,
and time
and
again.
I have been,
You've done it.
And I have been in there many times. But what I wasn't expecting was my reaction you're standing there in the stillness and in the dark. And then as the sun beams in, this little light comes in and it illuminates the chamber. So my first thought was, did they actually build it just to highlight the shortest day of the year? And here I am standing 5,000 years later experiencing the same thing. Or did they build it because when the sun shines in there, it would illuminate the chamber, which in turn would illuminate the bones of the dead, symbolic of their rebirth in the afterlife and, of course, the dawning of a new year. So I thought, well, it's one or the other. But to stand and witness it 5,000 years later was simply amazing. And the silence was extraordinary. And I suppose it's maybe the first time really understanding the power of the sun and the importance maybe of the sun and how that has been sort of wiped out in later traditions. But if you're in there on the 21st of December, you could see very well why people worship the sun.
And it's just the select few who win the lottery.
Yes.
And normally we associate that with a material gain, with winning a big lump sum of cash. But in a way, would you say the reward of being there is much deeper than...
Than what? Winning the lottery? I don't think so.
But you know, it's a different kind of reward, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I kept saying, why have we let all this go? That we don't worship the sun or embrace the shortest day of the year and the longest day of the year. And then when I came outside, I started crying because there were people out there chanting who were still part of an old ritual that is being revived, not just here, but in Stonehenge and Mazo and all the other places. So I thought, God, these people are right. This is something to celebrate. This is fantastic.
I've come about 15 miles southwest of Newgrange to the Hill of Tara. This is a location which also has an intricate complex of passage tombs. It was the place where the High Kings of Ireland were crowned. So it has had, for centuries, a huge significance. I'm here with Bernadette Connor. Now that we are walking up to the Hill of Tara, we're coming above the fog and into the true light of the day.
That's right.
It's quite a sensation.
It is really
isn't it?
beautiful. It has a really lovely, peaceful, I think, comforting feeling up here. It has a really Christmassy winter feel to it. The fog, the cold, the frost early in the morning.
This is the place that you come, Bernadette, with your friends.
Yes.
You celebrate the Winter Solstice here and at Newgrange.
That's right, yes.
So why?
I suppose because I've always had a draw to nature and being outside. For the Winter Solstice, I would meet up with friends here and we would come up before the dawn and get all muffled up and bring a flask and all that kind of thing. I might bring my drum. I have a shamanic drum, and particularly if you're here on a really clear morning for the solstice, it's just fantastic. It really is. And there's so many people around, and you've got people singing and some people dancing and some people drumming, and it's a really, really special place to be. That morning.
What do you feel is drawing you to it?
The energy of the land is what draws me, really, because I think that this place is so special. It has been for so many thousands of years. You know, the fact that our ancestors knew about this place, they held gatherings here. They have structures all over the land.
But as we climb to the top of the hill, we can see in the rise and fall of the land where some of those monuments, those special places would have been. They're all covered in grass now, and the sun is shining through the bare trees beyond us, and it's being fractured into hundreds of beams down across the Hill of Tara here. It's interesting what you're saying about people. More and more people are seeking this, really what they feel is quite an elemental thing, and they choose to do it in these places which have a link to our ancient past.
We all need something to hold on to. We all need some kind of belief. And for me, that's what I get here. And I think the fact that people make an effort to come together in a place like this, you know, that when there is no Christmas trees and there is no lights hanging and there is no presents and all that kind of thing. Because it isn't about that, is it? You know, it's about meeting up with people who you get on with and you can share with and you feel comfortable with, and they don't have to bring anything or be a certain person. It's open to everybody. That's, I think, the huge thing, that it draws people.
I'll leave you now, Bernadette.
Yes,
I mean,
okay.
all I can really say at this point, I suppose, is happy solstice.
Happy solstice to you.